Hey, everybody, I want you to meet somebody really special. I know I say that every time, but this time I really every time I say it, I'm like, they're so special because everyone who comes here is so special. Catherine Wood is the CEO and head coach of Unbounded Potential. She's also a master certified coach and sees her work as most impactful when she's helping people who are empathic, who have a highly sensitive personality type, and who also are leaders and want to lead mission-driven companies and want to lead movements. So welcome, Catherine. I'm so excited you're here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we've connected. We have a lot of mutual friends, and I was so attracted to your work and was so excited to invite you here because I don't know that many people that specialize specifically in the work that you do with empaths and HSPs, which you see as very, very connected. Tell me a little bit about what makes that type of person unique and why having a coach that gets it and understands them is particularly important.
Well, first of all, I identify as all of those traits. I identify as highly sensitive, empath, and introvert. And I I love working with empaths in particular because empaths care so much about the work they do, the people they help. They are extremely mission oriented and purpose driven. And when we as a society can put more economic power and wealth in the hands of business owners who care as deeply as empaths do, I think that we can change the culture of business. I think that we can bring empathy back into the world of business. And empaths, they redirect their wealth, right? They reinvest in their communities. They're intentional with their spending, with their giving. And so I just think there's so much capacity to do good by supporting businesses who care as deeply as empath run businesses do.
Oh my gosh. So much goodness in what you just said. And it's so funny because I completely identify as an empath and an HSP, and I'm off the charts extrovert, which I think makes me extra weird because most of them are introverts. But it's so fascinating to hear you talk about how important this is. And I think, in I'm curious on your thoughts on this, but I think this is particularly important in the post-pandemic world because people have experienced so much trauma and so much hardship, and if they're business owners, they're adjusting to a customer base that has been through so much, and if they're consumers, they're trying to navigate the decisions that they're making, and their whole value system was probably completely changed during that time. Have you seen a pretty big shift in awareness around your work in the last few years?
I think coaching can be particularly impactful when people reach a point of no returns, a point where they are no longer willing to continue life, business, relationships in the way that it has gone. And I think the pandemic caused many people to get to that breaking point. Now, I think that is only one access point to change. One of my favorite quotes about change leadership comes from Dr. Michael Beckwith, who says that pain pushes until the vision pulls.
Mm.
I think pain points that we experience personally in life are oftentimes a motivator, an incentive to change, and they're not the only point. I think we can be pulled forward by a vision, and that can also be a compelling place to create change from. And for many of us, being pushed by pain can often be the initiating point.
Oh my gosh, that was so beautifully said. What is it that you're seeing that is some of the common challenges that the people that you help face? What are some of the common signs? It's like, if you're an empath, if what
Mhm.
are what are some of those items?
So I work with lots of clients in a couple of key industries. I work with clients in finance. My background is in economics. I used to be a senior economist for the federal government. So I speak in numbers and data and attract that type of clientele. I work with a lot of women in healthcare because I think there's many entrepreneurial women who were really pushed out of a 9 to 5 during the pandemic and looking to really thrive in entrepreneurship. And then I also work with lots of entrepreneurs in the creative fields. So marketing, branding, social media strategy, things like that. And some of the common themes I notice across the board is let's see, boundaries,
Mm,
probably my favorite topic to talk about. Um, Aligned leadership models, really running their business as an expression of themselves, building their business out in a way that's aligned with their values, their lifestyles, how they want to manage their business and also be in their homes. Um, I think there's so much pressure to do business a certain way that taking back that permission, realizing that there's no rule book. You can run your business, you can operate in business, you can follow any work schedule, and it's all an expression of permission. For me, it all comes down to being willing to give yourself the permission to run your business on your own terms and by your own rules and by your own SOPs. Let's see, those are a couple. Um, what are others? Scaling in a way that's aligned with your values. Again, I think there's so much external pressure to do things a certain way, to think we need to be bigger, to think we need to grow, grow, grow. And one of the books that I just picked up that I'm so excited to read, it's called, I think it's called A Company of One.
mhm.
And and I love what it represents, right? Like the idea that we don't need to be big, better, larger in order to feel fulfilled and satisfied and content.
My gosh, you are speaking to my values for sure. That is something that I love the way that you just said that. Let's talk a little bit about boundaries for leaders. And I think for many of us who are empathic, who are sensitive, but also are dreamers and visionaries, and we get excited about the big idea. And what makes boundaries, you said it was your favorite topic, particularly challenging when you're going out to accomplish your mission?
I think the reason it's my most favorite topic is because it's had the most life-changing impact on my bottom line, on my time, on my energy, and on the people that I attract into life. And I think as empaths, we are natural givers. We we're great enrollers. We all enroll, that feels like a bit of a jargony term. So
Yeah.
we're great at enrolling other people in services that we believe in or deeply value. So we're great at talking about other people. We are natural sellers for the people and the missions that we believe in. Sometimes we do that at the expense of ourselves. Sometimes we're so good at talking up and selling other people that it can be at the detriment of valuing our own impact, our own contribution, our own value proposition. So I think that's a huge mindset shift that empaths have to make. I think in terms of the business partnerships that we can attract, uh, we're producers, we're givers. We're so inspired by the visions that we bring to life that we just feel so connected with the mission that it can oftentimes be at the expense of the partnership agreements that we set up or the workflow uh, dynamics that we align with the people that we decide to partner with. So I always say that givers attract takers.
Mhm.
And there are unhealed qualities about being a giver, and then there can be a healed way of being as givers, right? And so I think that, empaths in particular have to do the internal work to really heal um, the wounded aspects of their empathic ways of being so that they don't continue to attract unhealthy people who will just take from them in business.
Yes. And that could be clients, it could be partners, it could be anybody, right? Anybody and team members. I've had that dynamic with team members in the past where all of a sudden you're like, I feel like I'm working for you. How did that happen? So, what are some of the steps that you've made? You said it's one of the biggest changes that you've made on your own business that has changed the way in which how you bring in revenue and your overall happiness in your company, leading your company is what I heard you say.
Mhm,
So, what are some of those shifts that have taken place?
mhm. Well, uh, I mean, I think it's a vulnerable place to start, but I'm the youngest child, and I don't talk about this, but I have an older sister who I am estranged from. And for me, that was a very early relationship of me being a giver in a relationship with a taker. And I think many empaths in particular have those family of origin relationships that they will continue to recreate and reinvent in adulthood. So I think for me and for so many of the people that I talk to in life, it really starts by getting clear on how we are reinventing relationships in the present that we have still unhealed from the past. How are we recreating those unhealthy relationship dynamics in order to gain approval, in order to gain love, in order to gain respect? And we are looking in all the wrong places for that love, approval, and respect. So I've done a lot of work around that, clearly. And that is the number one place to start for me and for most people that I speak with. I think that therapy is certainly a modality that can help. And coaching can also help that dynamic through a different lens, right? In coaching, we often say that it's a present to future based conversation, but we can always draw on moments from the past so as to point to how we are recreating the past in the present and
Mm.
what there is to do differently in order to create forward, in order to create the partnerships, the relationships that are aligned with who we're in the process of becoming and what we're committed to creating.
I love that designation of how therapy helps and then how coaching helps. And I'll say that's been my experience too, is that therapy tends to look at, that unhealed trauma and tends to um, assist with understanding how the brain functions, right? Whereas coaching does that as well, but has more of that future momentum and helps us redefine our relationships with our future selves. So I want to ask about something else that you mentioned, which I think was so interesting, is that people who are empathic need to look at scaling a business differently. And the reason why I share that is because I don't even know if you know my background. Many of the listeners do, but I had this big, huge company that I walked away from because it was so hard and it was so heavy and it wasn't the right fit for my personality. It was heavy on compliance and legalities. And I was so excited to build it. And then once I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not a fit for me. And so, sold off the license agreements and exited. Um, but I'm curious, like, how should somebody who's empathic think about building their business differently than maybe what they're being told they should do by other people, or what would be considered the norm in terms of entrepreneurship?
Mhm. So, a couple places to look. For one, it comes down to values. I think being really clear on your core values in business and in life are so foundational because as an empath, whenever I make a strategic choice in my business, whenever I uh, take on a new partner, I can always assess the decision through the lens of my values and see whether there is an alignment. Now, making decisions in service of values is futuristic, it's future focused, and it's kind of end goal driven. And the more nuanced version of that is making decisions from a place of wanting to please another person, wanting to protect a relationship, wanting to take care of someone else. Um, I have exited a couple partnerships in business, and what I have noticed in more than one of those is that I was making decisions from a place of prioritizing the relationship versus prioritizing myself and my more meta level values. So coming back to my values and whether the decision is in support of my values is always an empowering place for me to make decisions from.
I love that. And when I'm thinking about our audience, many of them who are scaling companies, who are entrepreneurs, and let's say that you are finding that you are out of alignment with your values because you've made the other person bigger than you've prioritized the relationship and essentially in a lot of ways the other person more than themselves, because we're natural givers. What are some of the what are some of the steps we can do to sort of avoid those situations in the future? Like, what are some signs or early signs that maybe we can kind of see it coming sooner?
Mhm. So, coming back to the first point I said around relationships, asking yourself, who in my life does this relationship represent? What relationship that I, knew in my childhood am I reinventing the dynamics of here? What am I earning, right? Like, what am I trying to earn from being in partnership with this person or entity? So that's one place to start. A second place, which is not, I don't think this is comfortable for empaths because I think many empaths at some point come to terms with being martyrs in life. Because I don't think we always take responsibility for the fact that we give, but it's not empty handed. We give so as to earn love, approval, trust, relationship, care, validation, whatever. We are always giving so as to receive something. It's just not the thing we want to be receiving. It feels a little hard to hear. I think that's like some of the tough love coaching that I do with a lot of my very successful empath CEOs who have no time and energy and are burned out. And it is certainly a reopening to taking back your own personal power when you start to take responsibility for how you are creating your relationships. And this is really key because empaths who are in unhealthy partnerships, relationships, have unhealthy client dynamics, whatever it may be, we created those dynamics. So we get to take responsibility for how we caused the relationship to go this way, for how we set up our partnership agreements, our SOPs, our operational dynamics. So once you can really start to discern how you are the source of how it's going, then you can take responsibility with that person or organization and see if there's opportunity to reinvent. Like, hey, Jane, I notice that, gosh, I've created this dynamic in our partnership where I'm the one who's handling all the client interaction, who's managing the community, who's doing all the invoicing, because I always used to do all invoicing. And I can see that this was all on me. This was all my idea. And it's not working for me anymore. I notice I'm resentful. I'm harboring some feelings. It feels like I'm putting in more than you are. And it's totally on me. This is on me. This was my idea. And I'd love to see about reinventing partnership from here and seeing, how we can have a more equitable way of partnering. And then from there, you actually, and I experienced this, I remember having this conversation. And from there, you actually can have a more honest, transparent conversation and see whether reinvention is possible.
That's so wise. And I think it does. It shows what the other person's made of, because if they start gaslighting or if they start, raising their voice or something like that, then you have your answer, right? If they're like, wow, thanks for letting me know. I didn't know. Let me think. Even it's like, let me think about it. Or like, I really don't want to put in more than what I'm putting in right now. Like, that's okay, right? Like it's a fair response. Um, I want to ask, because we talked a little bit about partnerships, which I know, I've had partners, you've had partners. I think probably a lot of the people that are listening probably struggle with this more with clients. That's my guess, is that that's the more common challenge. Even if they're running a big company, maybe they have a multi-million-dollar agency, maybe they're a solopreneur who's a coach or a consultant. How does this show up in the client work? And then how can we sort of rein that back in?
Um, any coach that I've ever worked with, any consultant that I've ever had has always had that bad egg client, right? They've always partnered with those just like worst case scenario, awful fit clients. And not if, but when I coach any client through um, that experience, I always celebrate it because it is a point of such learning, such growth, such opportunity, and such clarity around who your people are and who your people are absolutely not. So it's not a matter of whether you can avoid those types of bad eggs. It's a matter of how fast you can experience them and how fast you can learn from them so as to prevent them from happening again, which I think is really important to gain a healthy sense of humor around, because I think for at every kind of level of business, you're going to be meeting new bad eggs that you then get to pivot and reinvent and realign from.
Yeah, I can share from experience. It's 100% true.
Yeah, right?
That's 100% true. Like the bad eggs at the multi-million dollar mark really aren't that different. And I'll say, as a consultant, one of my greatest joys is giving my I work privately with clients as well as have different group programs, but to give the CEOs that I work with directly the support system that I didn't have, when I was in their shoes. And obviously it has to be balanced, but there's something really rewarding about being empathic, sensitive, working with other empathic CEOs. And it wasn't by design. I just think that's who I ended up attracting, who care deeply about their work, who want to create a mission, who are creatives, who are caring. The clients I work with privately are just, they're world changing entrepreneurs. And I think giving them the support of somebody who doesn't have an agenda other than to see them win it's so fun to be able
Mhm,
to do. So
mhm.
leading into that, as we're wrapping up here, what's on the other side of this? Like, we talked about some of the struggles, we talked about some of the ways in which, the types of people you want to avoid, how to navigate it when you're in something that you realize is probably not a fit. But then once you sort of break through and it's not the daily struggle, right? And you start really performing as a result of understanding who you are as an empath. Like, what does that look like? What does that life look like?
Mhm. So I think it looks like working with absolutely ideal fit clients. I love every single one of my clients. I'm inspired by every single one of their missions and visions, and I gracefully exit out of any partnerships that where that's not the case. And with time, you learn how to do it sooner and more transparently and with a lot more dignity and self-respect. I think that's a huge shift. I think the time piece is another huge shift. I think that empaths who have really become generous but boundaried know how to honor their boundaries with a lot of grace. Their boundaries are embodied rather than rigid. I think
Yeah.
that that's a real shift. I think that when you're just starting to take back your um your generosity and be boundaried about it, it can occur a little rigid or off-putting. And then you get to a place where it's just embodied. It's just a natural expression of how you do business, of how you communicate, of how you operate. I think there's a lot more free time accessible from reclaiming those boundaries. Um, and I think there's just a lot. I think that alignment is a hype word, but I really believe it and stand by that we just make decisions from a more aligned place and we realign with a lot more dexterity and speed because as entrepreneurs, we're creators. So we're always creating and we can't create more of what we know. Otherwise, it would just be more of the same. So we're always creating new things. Will always be new learnings, new breakdowns, new breakthroughs. And so it's not a matter of, if we'll avoid failures, if we'll prevent missteps. It's just a matter of the time frame with which we realign and repivot and without it being at the expense of our well-being, our family life, our joy, our work-life balance, our personal satisfaction in life, right? We really gain some separation from our sense of who we are and our life and our lifestyles with how we run our business and what happens when we're in our offices for whenever our work schedules are.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was beautiful. If people want to learn more about you, they'd like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, they can check out my website at unbounded-potential.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's such a lovely conversation. For a minute there, it kind of felt like it turned into a personal coaching session, but then,
Oh,
yeah, I felt like you were speaking directly to me, and I know that many of our listeners will probably feel the same. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate you being here.
it was a pleasure. Thank you.